Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our open evening at the Loyola Institute in the School of Religion, Trinity College, Dublin. You're very, very welcome. What you're going to find out in the next hour or so is a little bit about what the Loyola Institute is, what it does, and why you might want to come and study here, because we have a number of postgraduate programs in theology that we want to invite you to think about joining in. So you are very, very welcome. And I'm here with a number of colleagues from the Loyola Institute, and together we'll give you a flavor of what's happening here. The Institute is about 10 years old, but obviously theology has been studied at Trinity College for a long, long time, from its very beginning. But the Institute situates itself in the College of Trinity, doing a special kind of theology. And what I want to try and do is summarize that to begin with by means of 4 brief questions. After that, I'll introduce my colleague, I'll introduce the programs, and then I'll introduce my colleagues to say a little bit more about the kind of work that they're doing. There will be opportunities for questions, and you are encouraged to put questions in the chat as the speakers are speaking, and we'll pick those up later on and we'll respond to those. There's also opportunity to contact me, I should say who I am, Michael Kirwan. I'm the director of the Loyola Institute and the convener of our theology programs. There's obviously a chance to get in touch with me at any stage or with my colleagues to talk about the programs further. First of all, those 4 key questions to do with what it is that we do. What, when, where, and who? What is theology? What kind of conversation is it? When does this conversation take place? Where does it happen? And probably the most important one, who? Who does it? Because our hope is that you will be listening to this and thinking, gosh, maybe I could do theology. Maybe I could be a part of the conversation that's going on. So let's take those 4 questions very briefly. What is theology? Well, it's commonly referred to as faith-seeking understanding. It's a particular kind of discussion about God and the things of God, but an attempt to try and bring some kind of order into the way that we think about God and the way that we speak about him. That idea that faith, one's commitment, one's religious belief, is always seeking to learn more, is what theology is about. So why do we speak of God as Trinity, as 3 persons, rather than 6 persons or 9 persons? How is it that it came about that Jesus Christ was spoken of as the Son of God? How do we use the Bible responsibly in our everyday lives and in our politics and so on? And what kind of human beings are we? Is there any hope for us? Are we unredeemably bad, or is there possibility of salvation? And what does salvation mean? So those would all be theological questions, and the attempt to try and look at those in an ordered way is what theology is. I mentioned the question when, because theology is also a conversation between the past and the present. Theology has been around for 2,000 years. It's an accumulation of wisdom, of communities and great thinkers. And that is important to be in touch with that for the problems that we face in the present day. We cannot look at the problems that we face as a world, and in particular in Ireland. You cannot face those problems or even understand those problems without a sense of how religion operates, and operates differently from the way it has done in the past. Now, you might say that we have nothing to learn from the past, that wisdom is not something that we need anymore. And if that's what you believe, then you won't really want to be doing theology. But you might also be interested in looking at, or might have an awareness of, what is missing, an awareness of what is missing. This phrase I love, and it doesn't come from a bishop or from a theologian. It actually comes from a secular thinker, a very important German philosopher, whose not particularly religious himself, but he's conscious that there's an awareness of something that was important and no longer seems to be regarded as important. And he speaks of this as an awareness of what is missing. And if that phrase resonates with you, then that might give a description of what theology is about. But where? Where does theology happen? Well, unfortunately, at the moment, it happens like this. It happens online. We are all speaking to one another digitally and virtually and so on. But when we are gathered, it happens on the campus of Trinity College. Loyola Institute is situated on the main campus in the centre of Dublin. But in another sense, it has a particular location. We see ourselves at a kind of junction between the academy, between the church and the wider society, that all of those areas are places where theology gets done in different ways. So on a Sunday morning, if you go to church, you will hear theology being preached to you. And you will hear society generally discussing questions about how religion fits into the public sphere and what religion has to offer to contemporary politics and so on. And then, as I say, it happens in the academy as well. So the situation of theology is at this intersection between the academy, the church, and the wider society. Fourth question, the who. Who does theology? Well, as soon as you start thinking about your faith in any kind of inquiring way, you are doing theology. And some people feel a desire to take that further, to do that in an organized way, even at postgraduate level. And you might say that our students come in two types. Well, they come in many types, but there are two particular groups you might think of. Those students who perhaps have never done theology before and would like to try it out to see how they like it, and they're looking to further their own faith seeking understanding. They're trying to get a little bit more of understanding of what it is that they believe and why they believe. We also have quite a number of students who want to study at a further level. They move on to do research degrees, and the MPhil, in particular, the MPhil program, which I'll talk about in a moment, that's a very good way of preparing oneself to do further study in theology. And we have both types of student in the same classroom. And as I say, very often students haven't done theology before, but they have this intuition, they have this desire to try and get a little bit more understanding of what they're doing. And I'm hoping, and we're hoping, that you might see yourself in that kind of category, somebody who might actually be drawn towards doing theological study. So it's a very brief summary of what's going on here. Very specifically, the programs that we are offering, well, there are basically three programs. There's an MPhil in Christian theology, and there's a diploma, postgraduate diploma, and there's a postgraduate certificate. And those are different levels of engagement, if you like, and for various reasons, students might choose one or the other. Very briefly, the differences between them is not that they're doing different modules or courses. They're doing the same courses, but in different permutations, so to speak. An MPhil program, normally done over 1 year, although it can be done over 2 years, consists of 6 modules plus a sizable dissertation, 15,000 words. The postgraduate certificate involves the same modules, but without the dissertation. And the diploma involves 3 of those 6 modules in different permutations. So the same teaching is going on for those students, regardless of which program you decide to pick up on. And there's information about this on the website. You'll find all the information that you need there. What are these modules? What's going on? Well, each of these modules takes you into the fabric of Christian theology in different ways. So, for example, there's a module entitled Jesus of Nazareth, Son, Christ, Word. It's an investigation of the different ways in which we've spoken about Jesus over the last 2,000 years. And in particular, how is it that theologians have come to speak of him as the Son of God? How do you arrive at a judgment like that? And how can you continue to believe and to speak of Jesus in that way in the 21st century? So that module, we call that Christology, reflection upon Christ, is obviously a very, very important one for theology. But then so is a module entitled Violence and Grace in the Human Narrative. It asks about what human beings are like. Are we inherently evil and selfish and incapable of redemption? Or is there such a thing as grace? Is there such a thing as a possibility of human regeneration and salvation? And the violence and grace narrative looks at us and looks at our story as these two forces of violence on the one hand and God's grace on the other, if you like, intertwining with one another. So that's a discussion about us as we stand before God. You'll hear a little bit later from one of my colleagues, David Shepherd, on the first words, which is his reflection upon the Bible, biblical theology. We have to use the Bible responsibly in our theological discourse. But what does that mean? How is it that we can use the Bible, once again, texts written many thousands of years ago? How do you use those texts responsibly in our public life, in our prayer life, and so on? Those are the first beginnings of theology to be found in the Bible, and Christian theology obviously has to take the Bible very, very seriously. There are other modules. There's a module on political theology, how theology fits into the present day and age and our concerns about politics and society. We have a module on theology in the arts, and you'll hear a little bit later on from one of my colleagues about our specialism in Celtic Christianity. Trinity College is the home of the Book of Kells, and we have a very rich kind of tradition now of reflecting upon medieval Christianity and Celtic Christianity as one of the things that is on offer here. That dialogue, once again, between the past and the present. So you see the details of the modules on the website, and you can look at those and look at the different permutations of them. That's what's involved in the substance of the programs. And as I say, the MPhil students get to do a 15,000-word dissertation on a theological topic that they choose with their supervisor and so on.